Welcome to the Evolution of ServiceNow Development Panel. My name is Chuck Tomasi, Senior Developer Advocate at ServiceNow, and it is my honor to be the host and facilitator of this panel. Now let's meet our panel.
Hi, my name is Jessi Graves. I work here at ServiceNow. I'm currently a Principal Curriculum Developer in the Training and Certification Organization. But I started ServiceNow back in May of 2008 as the Customer Support Manager, where we had a team of 5 back then. And since then have had numerous other roles, internal development, manager, and now training.
Is it my turn? I am Ruggeri. I am no longer with ServiceNow, but I was employee number 2. I like to not count Fred because it sounds better. And David Loo is employee number 1. And I was with ServiceNow from the early days past IPO.
Thanks for that shout out, Bo. My name is David Loo. I'm currently the CEO of Perspectium, but previously, like Bo said, I was an early employee, quite early, and more famously known as a demo data in the system. I think we're still in there, aren't we, Bo?
So, Bo, if you're employee number 2, does that make Fred employee 0?
Yes. I mean, technically, if it's your own company, you can't be an employee to yourself. So that's why, I mean, like I said, it makes David and I numbers sound better. It actually makes everyone's numbers sound better. So
yeah, we all get shifted 1.
I've been going with it.
We have an employee off by 1 number bug.
Yes, it's kind of like an index of, like a -1. So, that's what I consider it.
Nerd alert.
Well, let me stop right there before we get too much further. The purpose of this panel is to talk to some of these early app developers and get some insights of what building apps was like in those early days versus today. So I'm going to get started with our first question, although I think we leaked one out there anyway. Jessi, let me start that over. Jessi, many of our customers are familiar with Hi, which is now known as support. What do you remember about those early days of Hi?
I remember that anytime anyone started the company, they got an account, a user record in Hi with the admin role. So everybody could do whatever they wanted or whatever they needed, which was real fun. So you'd come in the morning and you would see extra fields on, the incident form, and you'd have to go over to somebody's office and say, why did you put these fields on there? What are they for? Oh, we need to track so-and-so. Well, okay, let's maybe put them in their own form section or, make it a little prettier for the rest of us who use it every day. But that was fun. You never knew what you were going to get every day.
Like a box of chocolates.
Yep.
we have several ways of creating fields these days. You've got the table record in UI16. We've got Studio. We've got the table builder in AES now. How did you create fields in those early days?
Oh, configure form layout. Right-click, configure form layout, add the field, put it, up and down in the slush bucket. That was the way to go. And I still do that today.
I'm going to be a little pedantic. It was personalized form layout back then.
Oh, all right.
I remember teaching a sysadmin course and somebody said, why is it personalized when you're doing this for the whole system?
That's right. You're right.
That's a very good question.
It's personalizing it for the company.
All right.
And I'll
question
bet,
for you, David. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I bet Bo remember this, that we actually spent quite a few lunches in Taco Bell talking about whether to call it configure or personalized.
Yes. And sooner or later, you just have to pick one and go with it.
Yeah, that was a discussion that was like Warren's over
So there
lunch.
was some thought around this. There was a lot of thought in the early platform. Yeah. Thank you very much.
And I think also to touch on, I was going to say the field showing up randomly for Jessi. Often it would be, we would have like a great idea. It would be like me, David, or Don, or someone talking Pat, and we'd be like, oh yeah, let's throw that in there. Sounds great. And obviously we wouldn't tell support, but we'd put it in there anyways. And then we would update it. And then after the fact, we'd be like, oh, we probably should have told support that this whole form's moving, or now we're adding another field on here to help them kind of do support a little better. But it was always a good surprise.
Surprises, and with no change management. Those are not.
Oh,
not
we didn't make
compatible.
mistakes.
There was no process. There was no oversight whatsoever. It was fun.
We were maturing. Question for you, David. One of the things that the platform is known for is its integration capabilities. Today we have Integration Hub, but the original tools are still there as well. What's one thing you're proud of creating that's still in use today?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm proud of it, but it's being used a lot. And I think the early philosophies of making things work in the most atomic way and then building up on it is a good philosophy even for today. As you can see, Integration Hub and Flow Designer, all of those new features come about from building on the scaffolding of the business rules and the configurations and the slush buckets, right? Those extended from it, and now you have a no code, low code way of making those changes. But in the beginning of the days, we went way back and we rewound, and the first thing that had to be done in integrations was getting data out and getting data in. In terms of getting data out, the most fundamental way is a URL, right? So it just made sense to add in URL parameters to get any data that you want and format it. So therefore, the question mark CSV, question mark XML, question mark SOAP, question mark REST, and so on was built just based on the URL. And then everything else on the UI came about using those resources. So I think that's kind of neat.
So like a lot of platforms that we have today, we had the APIs before we had the UI. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it was the fundamental, if I can test with a browser, it probably works with a program.
All right, I think you were also involved with import sets, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Yeah, and that took a good 6 months or 8 months of my life, and many visits to Bo's office, checking with him, am I doing the right thing? So that was passed on to me by Fred. Fred always starts these projects that was interesting and would give it to one of his developers to see if they can take it to the next step. And I went a little bit overboard with that and built an entire mapping UI and learned a lot of JavaScript on the way. And yeah, I'm proud of that actually. That's still in use today, and it's a fundamental, really low-level way of getting information into the system.
And you did a great job too, because we're still building on those fundamental features. We now have concurrent import sets and the robust transform engine, and data stream actions from Integration Hub can plug into the import sets, which I use all the time. Wonderful features. Nice. I think you mentioned in a previous discussion that Fred had an axiom or rule that said, what was it? Think about it for a week and then go implement it, or words to that effect?
Absolutely. I think it's, and Bo might concur with that. It's like, before you write a single line of code, make sure you spend at least 10 times the amount of time thinking about it before you do that. And it's worked well. It has worked well because many developers are impulsive. Unless you get into a mode where you can accept failure for the first 5 times, right? Don't write that single line of code yet. Think about your failures before you write it, right?
I think there was another phrase that he said, if I catch you copying and pasting code, you're fired.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good rules to live by.
Yeah. What about that day when he printed out all of our source code and glued it to the wall of our office to make sure we actually see how much code we're creating and how bad it was.
Yes, how many lines of waste were in there.
Yeah. He printed out I think a good chunk of it, and asked someone to actually glue it on the wall. And every time we walked it through the office, we would look at that and go, oh my God. That's a lot of code for doing something very small.
That's awesome. That's a good visual. And then at some point you go, we're going to need a bigger office.
Yeah. Oh, we run out of
All
glue.
right, question time for Bo. Now, back in the early days, when a customer spotted a defect, how was it handled?
Nice. So, I'll definitely give a little rundown here, and David could jump into, because, there's kind of different, kind of evolutions of it. So I like to always say, like, AS after support and BS before support. So we're kind of the two main models. So, in the early days, we actually didn't have any bugs at all. So we didn't need a support. And then David went and he wrote a bug. So then we're like, man, now we got to hire a whole support department. But in those days, basically, we always were good at, kind of, drinking our champagne or, eating our own dog food, as we always said. So we always tried to use the system from day one. So, and even in the early days, we did always have some kind of, incident. We may have not had the whole ITIL suite, but we always had something that you can log in and kind of open a ticket. But, so we would kind of get it, tickets in that way. In those days we were super small, right? So we'd still get emails. And then, before we actually had a support, it was me, David, and Don that were actually doing the support. And it was kind of a, when the phone rang, we were supposed to, rotate who answered it. And then, like, subtly over the days, me and Don kept moving our chair, like, away from the phone. So David was closer. And then, me and Don would basically pretend we didn't hear the phone. So in the end, David actually ended up, answering the phone and talking to customers a lot more. I don't know if he ever really picked up on that.
It's the arm's length support model.
Yes. But I mean, even in those early days, the customers really love that, right? Because you're even though you're small, you're actually talking like to the developers. So, and often they'll be like, "Oh, I have a bug with this," and we'd be like, "Okay, well, give us 15 minutes and we'll fix it." And we, in those days, sometimes we'd actually just drop what we're doing and fix that bug. And then it would get into, how do we update them? And in the early days, I think we were just doing ant builds, and we were kind of doing a little bit more manual in the early days. And then David kind of came up with a pretty slick way where, all our instances reported into home to figure out, they reported into high to figure out like what the version is, and they would go through this whole like kind of upgrade itself type of model. But even like way before that, before those auto upgrades, I actually do remember a few times like actually SSHing into the box and like editing the file like on the command line while the person's like on the phone. They're like, "Oh yeah, could you just refresh your browser?" And they're like, "Oh, it works now." And like, "Oh, okay." And then we'd obviously like go and we would, put it back in at that time we were using CVS. So we would put it back in the CVS so that the next time we built, it would be there.
Our definition of single tenant really is single tenant. Nobody else has what you have.
That helps. Now, I understand, Jessi, you had a chapter to write in this evolution of the support model as well.
Yeah, right. I mean, like I said, I came on as the manager of support. So that first week, Bob Alexander at the time, who is the he headed up the operations side of things, and so that included support. So he's walking me through the incident queue and like, okay, this is our queue of incidents. This is how customers, log issues that we have. And then, the five of us divvy them up. And I said, wow, there's like over 200 incidents in this queue. I mean, how are we keeping up with this? We need more people. He's like, oh, well, but half of those are defects. I'm like, what do you mean? I said, well, we assign them to the developers. I said, are the developers actively working them? Well, no, not really. If they call in again, we have to go bug them or something like that. And like, if only we had a platform where we could somehow figure out how to log problems too. So I think that was the second week or so, or within the first month, I proposed, hey, let's use problem to log defects. And I know the developers weren't too excited about that. They didn't want to see that list of defects, but it really helped us to be able to link them to multiple incidents, right? I mean, and they still use the problem table in high to log defects to the.
Filled one out today.
Yep, I know that I got a lot of pushback from that. They're like, "Oh, the new girl's coming in. She's got this great idea," but
No, but that goes to the maturity that many of our customers have as well. There's that ad hoc, get it done quick. We just need someplace to log this. But then as the process matures and they realize, hey, wait a minute, there's a root cause behind many of these related records. Let's look at problem and change and then expand out from there.
right.
So I think it's a wonderful story to tell that we've gone through that ourselves as well.
And we're the worst at it, because we're always just working for our customers so much and trying to run as fast as we can to meet their needs, and our own needs don't always get met, or at least they're last in priorities.
I think that's the cobbler's kids wear the worst shoes or something like that. But we do use our own software. We refer to ourselves as customer zero.
But there was a lot of, we would log a defect, or even before we logged it, or a problem, I should say, we would run to the office next door and ask Bo or ask Don or ask David, like, oh, there's a problem. This customer's having a big issue, and, can you help us? And it was all, they were all great about digging in when we needed to, and it was a high priority issue. And sometimes they would fix things before we even logged a defect. So.
And then I do remember sometimes too when those when the problem queue would start getting pretty big, we would like all come in on like a Saturday, and we'd be like, let's try to make a dent in this, being so optimistic. Like there's 150, let's get it down to under 100, and we spent like the whole day, and it was like 143 left. But, we would try to get in there, and we would try to really make some damage on that problem queue.
I think we got you involved with helping with our incident queue sometimes too. If it just got a little out of control, the developers would come in and start.
I know Don was really good at that, and I know I would obviously look in that, and I think a lot of us in the early days when we weren't like when ServiceNow wasn't huge, it was small enough where it was kind of encouraged for us developers. Hey, look at the incidents that are coming in. Look at the problems. These are kind of what Fred always instilled in us. It's like. These are people that are using your software that, that want to use it, want to make their business run better. So you should be interested in kind of the feedback that they're giving, the problems that they're having. So, we did, although we wouldn't necessarily like update the ticket as much so that, we weren't kind of pulled into the communication. But, to Jessi's point, we did look in there quite a bit just to make sure that, there wasn't anything obvious and, just kind of keep a good heartbeat on, are those customers happy? Do they like what we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. In those early knowledge conferences, all the customers knew all of our developers by name. So they knew everybody in the support and development and a lot of the sales guys. It was kind of fun. What's Don up to? Do you guys talk to Don?
I talk to him every now and then. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's over in wherever he's at, Georgia or wherever.
Oh.
I think he built a house on his daughter's land.
Okay.
Marta's land.
Mila?
Not Mila. He has two daughters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the other one, I don't think is a developer, so we don't know about her. But I think he built a house.
She is actually.
He has his. What's that, David?
I think she is. She's an IBM employee.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
But his address is Goodliff Way. So
nice.
Oh, that's cool.
Good for him. He was the best at
ultimate nerd alert.
He was the best at getting in the incidents and solving problems.
Oh yeah.
He would go in there and be like, Don, this person's having a problem, and he'd be like, rah, rah. Because it was something.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when you get a chance, and then you'd walk back, and as soon as you got back to your desk, you'd already fixed it and put the notes in.
Were you? I remember everyone, like Jonathan Sparks and everyone. I assume you knew too. They always had like this funny little list of what you had to do to talk to Don, right? And it was always like stand on his right side, not his left side, and then make sure you're in his field of vision so that he could see you, and patiently wait next to him until he turns his chair and acknowledges you.
Yes, there was that. He would not turn, and you had that awkward forgot about that. The awkward standing there until he got done typing and wanted to acknowledge you.
Yeah. And I was like,
But that was the nice thing. I mean, having to go to Pat's office was like, oh my God, I just want to quit right now. Don't make me go in there.
Office hours.
yeah.
All right. Hey, Bo, do me a favor. Just let's tilt that camera down a little bit. Somehow we creeped back into a little bit too much headroom there.
I know. It's just because I move around a lot. I'm animated.
I know. I understand.
I understand, but I'm having a hard time standing still.
Well, I imagine, Chuck, you probably have like some feet marks on the ground, right? Where you're supposed to stand.
Tape the shoes to the carpet.
Exactly. Probably do. Yeah. They're stapled in there.
I'm hanging onto this bar height table for all it's worth. It's like, don't move.
It's really hard to just look at the camera and not be able to
I don't think I ever did. I'm like keep looking at the screen with.
Okay, good.
I've got you all just off to my right of the camera, but what I'm looking at is a monitor behind the camera, and it's got like my next question coming up.
Oh.
So I've learned over the years to look at the camera and try not to blink.
Yeah, I feel like an idiot just staring at the camera.
But you know what? It looks a lot better that way.
Wait, what?
It does.
All right, I'm exported.
Everybody exported? David, are you exported?
Yes.
Less than a minute.
Less than a minute left. Jessi?
Yep, I'm good.
All right. We're waiting on David then.
10 seconds.
Come on, David. Darn, man.
I got the oldest computer here. Come on.
Got the Mac with the silver keys.
Jessi, did you ever hear the other story about Don and throwing his mouse? That's got
Yes.
over exaggerated.
Yeah, retell that though. It's been a while.
So it was basically the real story is that Don like was going home a little early, but there was like a support ticket that came in, and it was like, you know, I don't know who it was, but it was a dumb ticket that was super annoying. And Don was, you know, he used to like kind of sometimes lift his glasses, but he was like reading the ticket. And I think it was me. I think it was just me and David. Maybe there's that guy, Paul Morrison, that used to work there.
Oh, right. He works here now again, by the way.
Oh, he does? Oh,
yeah.
He does.
Oh, nice.
Came back.
So Don just got frustrated with this ticket, and he like slammed his mouse down, you know, and then just walked out and left. But from all our perspective, it looked like, you know, he just like threw his mouse down. He got super mad and like just stormed out of the office. So then there was this basically an ongoing joke that, you know, don't give him a cordless mouse, one, you know, because someone could get hurt. and two, that he is basically branded as a mouse thrower. But
he was, whenever I talked to him, he was so mild-mannered. I'd have a hard time picturing him doing something like that.
yeah,
He's kind of a curmudgeon, but he was the best at helping customers. Like he really
hands down, yeah.
and he was really good at replying. Sometimes though, I wish I would have saved some of his comments, but some of them were like, "Oh, Don, like if you would have read the thing, you would have known that you needed it."
Yes, directly to the customer.
So he responded to one of my early forum posts. I think it was like sometime in late 2008. And I posted a question out there and I said, "Hey, would it be possible to get in touch with you?" And he said, "No, we work in a basement with no windows."
I remember that. I remember that. That was classic.
I know Suzanne Smith has that bookmarked somewhere, and I need that bookmark.
All right. I've got to herd the cats back here. Woo! I love these stories. David, are you all done?
I'm all done.
Okay, question for you, David. If you could go back and tell your 2004 self to change one thing on the platform, what would that be?
And again, I think this is one of those things we talked about during one of those Taco Bell lunches. It would be there's several things. One of them would be to make the date time feel at least millisecond.
Why would that be?
Because sorting by the date time field doesn't really necessarily give you the right order if things were created in a millisecond. And that's
yes.
important.
For anybody who's been in the system log and wants to see their messages appear in the order in which they were executed, that could be troublesome. Yep.
Can I add another one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Say
Get up
another
to.
one? Okay. So the sys created by and the sys updated by are not reference fields. So
that is
they
true.
are just a text field, and that has caused a bit of a business rule logic later on that has to be quite fancy to find the right user based on the user ID.
I always wondered
So
why that was.
That's what I would want to change.
Yeah, why was that?
I don't know. Was it a Chalupa day or something?
This is
like
the
that?
perfect time when you get to blame Fred. I don't know. Fred did it.
Oh, we're
He
throwing
decided
Fred under the bus.
Yep.
However, I'm going to put a however on that sys created by and sys updated by. You can always tell if someone from support logged in with their maintenance account or something, because they wouldn't have a reference field to something. They're not in sys user, but you could always see, David Loo at SNC or maint or whatever it was that you go, ooh, somebody was in here. So there's that benefit.
That's right.
And you don't have to resolve a reference, right? So it is actually more of a performance better too.
Sure, yes.
We'll put a positive spin on anything.
I guess it's less of a regret rather than it's a nice to have.
Well, when stuff starts slowing down, you got to ask yourself, like, how many queries am I making to the database, right? So then when you look at things like those fields that aren't references, then you actually save a couple queries.
Well, you can't remember the 32 characters in the society?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, there's a trivia question. Does anybody know of a record that has a sys ID that is not 32 characters?
Admin. The admin user, right?
Nope. The default view in sys under UI under view, the default view's sys ID is default.
I thought the admin user's sys ID was admin, or maint was maint.
But I am happy to say that David and Bo, I was on a March 2007 instance. You still have the same sys IDs, even though you're listed as David.Loo and Bo is listed as Bo.
Well,
Actually, a fun fact there is everywhere I've worked, I've actually always had to put up a fight to make sure my user ID is BOW, just so I didn't have to type my whole name. Fortunately enough, at ServiceNow, I was early enough where it was already Bo established, but even when the HR police came in, it was still, I can't rename all my stuff. It's everywhere. So
did we actually get
I'm
a
still
different
waiting
vote?
to get into the demo data. All right, question for you, Bo. Before Flow Designer, before the workflow editor, how was a process automated? How did we do process automation way back when?
So, this is actually a really simple one because we actually just did a lot of things in business rules. So, and I know it's been a while since then. So, when I joined in 2005, that was basically a little over 15 years now. So, as we got into more of like the workflow editor and stuff like that, those were more recent. But in if you have any more insight too, David, but from my standpoint and remembering, we just did a lot with business rules. So there was just a lot of script and I know that stuff's used a lot, but you can really do whatever you want with that stuff. And then obviously eventually we would find patterns like, stuff with like the, the approval rules and process guides and stuff like that. So it was really kind of a, we're writing a bunch of business rules and then we start identifying patterns and then we say, oh, hey, if we did this, then we actually wouldn't have to script it. We could just put it in a table and then, then we can kind of extract it. We can make it part of an update set and it's not, script that has a conflict. But yeah, to answer your question, really just a lot of script and business rules.
Yeah, I want to add that, being foundational and being evolutionary was an important aspect of our development philosophy back then. Everything has to be consistent and small. That's why you have, the business rule, you have the dictionary. You have things that are fundamentally working at a very low level that then you can evolve and build complex UI and automation on top, but not the other way around. You know, it's harder for you to go big and then find out that you need to do something smaller for some other function to work. Having that foundation of building blocks that allows you to step on it and go further on was an important thing that was hammered into us in the very beginning.
Yeah, and I you know, a lot of that, you know, obviously came from Fred, and he always, you know, would preach like the good enough software, and you know, in those early days, we were doing a lot of things that were, you know, innovative. I mean, ServiceNow still is doing things innovative, but you kind of get to the point where when you're building something, you know, Fred would always say, hey, you know, let's solve for the 80% case. Let's not try to do the 100% case. And then let's like not get too crazy. Let's get it out there so it functions and it works. So it's like, you know, just the first revision of it, let's get it into the customer's hands, and then let's get some feedback from them on what we need to change. So that was kind of like, to David's point, really the philosophy. The other thing I'd want to say, which I always thought was funny, is, you know, Fred would always, like, when he would open a file, he'd always like use his thumb as an example. And he'd always say, if the scroll bar is bigger than my thumb, there's too much code in here. And I actually live by that standard today. It's actually true. If you have a file with that much code, then it is, you know, it's too much in there.
And then we created 500 files.
Exactly. But to your point, though, David, that's smaller units, right? So
yeah.
Easier to unit test, and you got back to when you were talking about business rules and recognizing those patterns and putting them into more abstracted layers. That gets back to something that I preach continuously to a lot of developers: is look for those opportunities to make your application data-driven, so that you're not continuously going back to your dev instance and writing changes and getting those promoted. If you can just configure that application, whether it's approval rules or something of that nature, all the better. It just makes it so much easier to continue to move forward. But you have to have those atomic elements, and I really would have loved to have been part of those discussions way back when to understand what those particular pieces were that set the foundation for today. That's some interesting stuff. All right, another question for David. Wait a minute, I skipped. Somebody's gonna have some fun editing there. I don't know where I was going with that. Oh, I'm back to Jessi. I'm gonna jump back here a little bit. You talked about update sets a little bit, Bo, and this is really open to anybody. Today, we move our changes between our instances using source control, the app repo. Good old update sets are still around, and we're using modern DevOps practices to integrate with our CI/CD pipelines and automate and scale and all that good stuff. There must have been a time before update sets. I feel like I'm talking about the Big Bang or something here. How were changes moved between instances in those early days?
go for it, David.
Go ahead, David.
Okay. You get a bunch of guys and you sit in a room and you just talk loud. Did you check that in yet? That's how it is.
But how would a customer do that if they were making a new business rule, for example?
Customer never did. I mean, customer would just modify the production instance directly, and that was one of the early tenets, is that we made a platform that did not need to be staged, right? Changes did not need to go through the stages that are required today. But as complexity settled in, as organizations grew bigger and there's more governance around changes around the IT process, that didn't work anymore, right? Because you have to know the target audience and the target customer we had back then was Oklahoma University, right? And two ladies, right, in IT that would directly call Bo and myself and go, "Is it done yet?" Right? And then we go, "Wait a minute." And we would make some changes for them. And then we go, "Can you refresh your browser?" And it was done, right? So that was how it was. And it was completely, I wouldn't say completely, it was largely data-driven, right? You would right-click, do this, right-click, do that. And so those changes were recorded for upgrade purposes, right? Because those changes needed to be played back during an upgrade, but never saved anywhere else except for the single tenant instance that the customer ran on.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example of something that we didn't necessarily know where it was going to go.
Yeah.
But to David's point, yeah, we had, I don't know how it is today, but back then we had an updates directory, and in that there was like one that was called Glide, and there was one that was called I think ITIL. And so this was before dev and test. No one got a dev and test. You just got a URL. And even in the early days, it was service-now.com/my name. So we didn't even have like domains for them. But it would basically be like David said, that the whole intention is when you right click, you modify the list or the form, you personalize it. It would just write out that XML file in the update/customer, so that next time when it updated, it would basically skip the ones that we had out of box. So it was basically saying, hey, the customer overrode this, so let's use theirs. And to David's point, like that was fine with a lot of our early customers. But as we grew, then we're like, okay, some people are not demanding, but some people are asking for a dev and test because they're bigger, they're more organized. So then that really, we started getting into cloning, which would mean we'd have to like copy that directory around. But then eventually got to the point where, okay, the update sets were born. Okay, we need a way to take these files, and move them around. And then we need a way to organize these files in different sets and move them around. So that's kind of, the evolution of that, starting just, super simple, just writing it out, to actually being able to move it around.
Actually, I remember right before then, that's when we invented the right-click export XML. From the browser, you could actually export a business rule with all the SysID intact, and then go to another instance and they'll go import XML, and it would go right in and modify your instance, right? Without a trace. Nobody knows who did what. But that was
that feature.
Yeah, there was a lot of changes were made that way until we realized, right, it had to be more than that. And then Fred, just kind of went away and then came back and go, let's do an update set, right? Let's do a recording feature where you turn it on and do that.
I've used export XML and import XML to cover a multitude of sins.
It's a lifesaver, right?
Oh my gosh, I forgot to save a copy. So I go over to a demo instance or another. It says, export the file over there, import the file over here. Nobody knows.
That was a big deal in support. Yeah, we fixed a lot of problems that way.
And I was talking to one customer, I think he was around 2005, 2006, and he said, yeah, I remember whenever we wanted to promote things from dev to prod, we had to remember every file we touched and export XML and import XML. I went, wow, that is just a horrific change process, but it worked really well. David, you mentioned right-click export XML, so that leads into my next question for Jessi. We haven't forgotten about you. How many things back then were right-click this and right-click that, and which ones do you still use today?
I mean, I think all of the right-click stuff is still in the platform today. I mean, if you're looking at a list, you can sort, you can filter out, you can do it other ways too, but I don't think we've taken any of that out. You can correct me if I'm wrong, because I still use it, but things I still use, yeah. I mean, I sort columns. That's the quickest ones. Sort by updated. And then configuring forms, configuring lists, all right click. That context menu is still alive and well, that's for sure.
I know that we've exposed a number of those in different ways, because it used to seem like you'd right click on a field label and you'd get configure label, configure dictionary, or show choices. You'd get some different context menus there. But as we expand out of the hardcore IT developers into the organization, into those citizen developer personas, we're showing people different ways to do that. Like Form Designer would be a classic case of that. Look at all the things you can do with Form Designer that used to be right-click, personalized form layout, right-click, show choices, right-click. It's like that was a lot of right-clicking, and It feels like there's an easier way today, but we've never taken away a lot of that old stuff like you mentioned. I think there was something in the application navigator over on the right that used to be there that you could configure an app menu or something that's no longer there. Now it's a pencil icon.
Yeah, I was going to say they took it out for a while and then they brought it back as a pencil icon. And people probably complained about that too. It's like, I just want to go edit the application, and they took it away for a while and they brought it back prettier.
That's what it was. Edit application. Well, I got to admit, these have been some amazing stories and fun looks back on the evolution of ServiceNow development. Huge thanks to all of our guests, Jessi, David, Bo. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
Good to see you, David and Bo.
And thanks for watching, everybody. And I will talk to you again real soon. Done and done.
Sporting. Nice, David. I still have that one.
My bottle.